Okay, we should be good to go.
Okay, welcome to the Revere Public Schools Policy and Procedure Subcommittee meeting. It's August 11th, 2021. It is 6:04, and roll call of the subcommittee members. I can do Fred Sinella.
Present.
Stacy Rizzo, present, and Susan Gravellisi, absent. Also in attendance is a school committee member, Anthony D'Ambrosio, Assistant Superintendent Lorenzo Garcia, Assistant Superintendent Richie Gallucci, and Superintendent Diane Kelly. And thank you everyone for attending. So I think it should be a relatively short meeting. Diane, can you share the screen? If I can pull anything up.
Do you want me to give you share permission, or do you want me to pull stuff up for you?
Well, I have it in a folder, so if you can give me permission.
Okay, give me 1 second. Okay.
I'm just going to start off with two fast ones.
Why is this not? Well, let me try it this way. Okay, you should be able to share now, Stacy.
Okay, so the first one was policy issues for the pandemic. And basically we voted on this last August 2020. I know I looked it over. I don't see any reason that we need to continue this specific policy because it really is when the pandemic was all starting. So unless Fred had any
Stacey,
questions.
Just so that you know, we can see your folder, but we can't see the document itself.
And it's on my computer.
You might have to stop sharing, and then when you click share again, pick the document instead of your folder.
Anything?
No, I've seen the same thing.
Well, so much for that fast meeting.
I have it open on mine if you want me to try.
Well, then I go for it.
Okay.
Whatever works.
Okay, let's see here. I think this is the document, right?
Absolutely. Thank you. So this was back at the beginning of the pandemic. Unless Fred has any questions, I'm just going to ask if we could recommend rescinding this policy.
Excuse me, Stacy, you recommend that we continue it?
No, rescind.
Well, I thought we were going to have that the face masks would be in effect.
That would be a different policy, Fred. This is
Okay.
the pandemic policy that affected a few different policies. So it was like a supplemental to the policy handbook.
Right. So it's served its purpose and we'll go on from this.
Right. But unfortunately, in politics, I guess you have to have a vote to rescind also. I'm just, any question, Fred?
No. As long as it's coming up elsewhere.
Yeah. So do you agree with rescinding?
Yes, I do. And I so move.
Okay, and I will second, and we will send that off to the full committee. The next one would be the handbook cover page. Diane, would you have that?
Can I make one suggestion on the other one before we move on?
Sure.
I'm just wondering if it would be prudent to have an abbreviated version of that gives a little bit of real-time flexibility, since we don't know exactly what direction we're going in yet. I agree with you that we don't need all of those maybe more
Right, and
specifics.
that's where I thought, some of Richie's, points in his PowerPoint presentation, maybe we can condense and come up with a few things in one page.
Great. All right. That's awesome.
Okay.
Well, instead of abolishing it, why don't we just put it on hold or until further notice, or so that way you can just resurrect it and take whatever you want out of it rather than having to start from scratch.
Well, there's only a few paragraphs, Fred, and Dr. Galucci has a PowerPoint presentation on the busing,
Yeah,
the busing and COVID protocols. So we could take what he has and then combine it with a few paragraphs that we probably would like to keep.
All right, so no need to go back to the, okay, all right, fine.
Okay. How's that sound to you, Diane?
Yeah, that sounds good. I think that we can do it in a much more abbreviated fashion.
Handbook cover page, basically the same thing. It served its purpose, but I'm also thinking that the page that we're going to make with the busing policy and the COVID policies, along with those paragraphs we want to take out, that may be pertinent to being the handbook cover page. Diane, do you have that one?
I do. Let me give me 1 second here. Let me just close a couple of things. Page. Oh my goodness. I have too many screens open. All right. There you go.
Again,
Can you see that now?
Yeah. So that was just the cover page in the handbook for the beginning of the pandemic. Basically talking about hybrid and remote. So I think this is something that can be incorporated in that one piece of literature that we can come up with.
Agreed.
Fred, what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, it's the wordage. Yeah, okay.
Okay. You know, parent-teacher conferences held remotely. It might still be, but that's something that we can, you know, where everything is still fluid and that word's back. We'll go, yeah, there's too much for everyone to read. So I think one simple page might be easier for every parent to deal with. They have enough on their plate.
And I think there's a lot in there, just like the last one, Stacy, that was a lot more relevant last year when we were full remote and hybrid. We're definitely moving back to a more, even if we're not fully traditional, a more traditional outlook on the school day. And I think that, yeah, hopefully we can maintain that for the year.
Okay, so Fred, do I have an approval to rescind?
So moved.
Okay, thanks. Second. Okay, and then the third item is the face covering. I sent that out. Unfortunately, I didn't realize I sent it from my Google Drive. Diane, do you have a copy of that?
I sure do. Give me 1 second.
Wow, you get paid the big bucks for this?
You already got paid the big bucks for the front door and the back door.
And Fred, what I'll say, or Anthony, or anyone else, MASC Council came up with this. They also had MASS look it over yesterday, just to make sure it didn't really go, you know, against anything that they believed in. so that we can work together.
Almost there.
That's all right.
I had one suggestion on this one, if I
Yep.
could. And it's really just a nuance thing. But I know
That's the
that
old one.
Pardon me?
That's the old one.
Is this not the new one?
No.
Oh, it's different than this. Okay.
That's last year's.
Oh, all right. So it's on an email from you, did you say?
No, we just got it.
Yeah.
All right, let me find it. Okay. Does that look like the right one?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I have to admit then that I did not read this version.
So are you going to wordsmith it?
No, my only question was there was a reference to blue disposable masks.
Yep.
And I just know a lot of people get those in different colors now. And
Right.
I was wondering if we could take out the word blue because obviously
Nope.
they don't care if it's
not
yellow.
here.
Okay. All right. Great.
But what I am going to say is in the last years, we did say no bandanas, no face shields. So would we like to keep those in?
I feel like that was good guidance. And we were advised on that by the Revere Board of Health and other people, like that people shouldn't be wearing the gaiters
Right.
or a face shield with no mask because it doesn't protect.
Right. And they're still recommending that, right?
Yeah.
So we can put that portion back in. Face covering. So we put like the second paragraph, a face covering that covers the nose. Like from the last one, it says not allowed and allowed. We can
Oh,
probably
right. But
put,
this might cover it where it says, oh, no, I guess not. No, you're right. We should add it in.
Those and, yeah.
yeah. And I was trying to think back to the letter that Richie sent out last week. Did we say they were going to have no mask outside altogether, or just when you can't be social distance?
Well, in that piece of correspondence, we didn't address that specifically.
Okay. Okay. So this basically would, and I just want to know if administration would be comfortable with that.
When kids are outside and distanced, yes, they do not have.
If they can't be distanced, you don't mind having a face mask.
Right.
I know I would prefer.
Which is kind of how we left off in the spring when they relaxed the rules a little bit for the summer and late spring.
Okay, good.
So just to clarify, outside and socially distanced, they don't need a mask. Of course, anybody is welcome to wear a mask at any time.
Right.
Absolutely. Do you think the teacher union would be welcome to have an all vaccination? I was really impressed with Boston, but right now I'm going to go for mask.
I think masks is a good place to start. The union did reach out yesterday and asked us to meet with them to talk about any parameters coming back to school. They did indicate that they didn't feel it was going to be any kind of a lengthy negotiation like we've had in the past. So we're working now with them and with legal counsel to try to set up a date that we can meet.
Okay, and would the face mask have to be part of their MOA?
I don't believe it does, because that is more of a health recommendation than anything else, but I can refer that question to Nick.
Good. Okay.
Would that come under the domain of this subcommittee?
I think that is going to come under the negotiation subcommittee, Fred, that you and Carol are on.
Well, I guess my question is that if it seems to be taking place X, Y, and Z, and does it have to be, well, you're going to check with Nick anyways and see if it has to be negotiated. Okay, we'll see what comes up. Okay. I mean,
I know that
personally would like to
I
see
know
it.
that in meetings that we've had, just having these discussions with different stakeholder groups, Dr. Galucci met with the nurses and some union leadership members, and they were in favor of the masks.
Oh,
So,
thank you. That's good to hear. I'm pleased to hear that.
Yeah. I think that, it was good that they all sat down with Lauren Buck and Dr. Kong and the school nurses to get a better understanding of the whole health issue and the whole scope of it. So I think that was a good meeting.
yeah, I'll say that Dr. Kong and Ms. Buck have been unbelievable and instrumental to us with guidance, of course, throughout the whole pandemic, but even now, when people might not realize that we're still connecting with them on a weekly basis, at least, and really relying on their expertise to make our decisions.
Anthony, I'm sorry, I didn't ask if you had any questions regarding any of the past 3 topics.
No, I'm good. I'm just listening in. So you all are doing great.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
So I'll let, we're going to go over the handbooks, but Dr. Galucci, do you want to do your presentations first?
Stacey, let me ask a question first, if you don't mind. Diane, we talked about, I asked when the freshman cookout was, and you let me know. The parents who will be coming to that in the auditorium, are they going to be required to wear face masks?
They are going to be required to wear face masks inside, but I believe the full event is going to be outside in the courtyard.
Oh, they're not going to be meeting as they did in the past?
I think that part is going to be cut out.
Okay.
So,
okay. Thank you for the clarity.
Okay, Dr. Galucci?
So I have it here. I can.
Do you want to give me screen share? I just edited one piece of it.
Oh, okay, sure.
Very
Will you make
small.
sure to resave that in the school committee folder, because right now it's got the other one.
Yep. And any changes that I make during this meeting, I'll capture.
Yeah. Okay. All right. You should be able to share now.
All right. Can everybody see this?
Yes.
All right, great. All right, so this kind of serves as an outline of the work that we have done with Dr. Kong and Lauren Buck. As Diane has stated, in the spring and early summer, as we've started to scale back, I would say that meetings with Dr. Kong and or Lauren have increased just to make sure that we are still abiding by all of the public health guidelines, that we are not becoming too lax in our policies and open ourselves up and sacrifice any safety for our students, teachers, and families. So as she said, their guidance and support has been immense, and perhaps now more than ever, when things are starting to change and become complicated for folks. So all of this PowerPoint was guided by my conversations with them, our nursing team, our administrators, our central office members, and members of the RTA, as we just stated. All right. So kind of the core tenets of our guidelines overview And Fred, this speaks to the question that you had just asked. All RPS staff, students, and visitors to any school are required to wear an approved mask while indoors and on school buses. So that is our foundational guideline. The masks, I would say last year it was distancing as the primary piece. The masks are now the primary guideline for this school year. Everybody that enters our buildings has to be masked at all times, other than when they eat or drink.
Well, Richie, the reason I asked was they're not going to have access to the new guidelines. This is an activity that would be taking place. I guess my question was, would we be providing them with masks if they were inside, even though it says somewhere that they're responsible for their own masks? That was my only reason for asking the question.
Yeah, and I think over the past year, and that's going to be a continued practice, Fred, I'm glad you brought that up. We have a ton of masks on hand, and we always have them out when we have any type of event where a person or one of our students forgets their mask. So we'll continue that practice as a foundational practice in our schools, having them available for anybody that may have forgot and is showing up without a mask.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So a small but important change this year is that social distancing is not technically required, but we are encouraging it whenever possible. And I can speak informally to a number of conversations with all of our principals across the district and our administrators. They are trying to distance whenever and wherever they can. So they are not looking at this second bullet and thinking, oh, okay, they relax social distancing. If anything, they are striving to distance in any setting, whether it's a classroom, hallway, cafeteria, in any way possible. And I've had a number of conversations with administrators that are coming up with ideas, running things by me, and they're certainly taking the encouraged distancing very seriously and putting it into practice. The third item is that we're going to continue our pool testing, which is really a routine COVID-19 safety check each Monday of the school year. So on Mondays, any and all members of our school community can participate in the pool testing program. I would say that this was a huge success for us last year. We often, almost always, got the results Monday evening, if not early afternoon, in some cases. And we were able to meet with any members of a positive pool early Tuesday morning before school programming started. We were able to conduct a Binex rapid test and identify if there was indeed a positive individual. When I work with Dr. Kong and Lauren Buck, they often talk about layers of protection. So vaccines are a huge layer of protection. That's probably one of the best, because the moment a vaccinated person walks through the building, that's a layer of protection without them ever doing anything. I would say pool testing is a very close second, because it gives us, at the start of each school week, a check on all of our staff and students that are participating to be sure that there are no asymptomatic positive cases within the school building, or symptomatic. And that's going to continue this year as well.
And I'll just add that our biggest goal this year is to engage more people in that pool testing every week, students and staff.
Yes.
Rich, by any chance, is there an average of how many opt into the pool testing on Monday?
So last year, I believe we were around, I want to say we were around 30% of people present. So the number of people within the building, 3 out of 10. To be very honest, Stacy, that's been a topic of conversation, and kind of in the midst of last year's pandemic, I probably didn't do enough to promote participation in that. Like, I know we sent the notices and they went home multiple times, but if that never reached a family, then chances are then someone who potentially would have participated might not have just returned that notice, got the notice. I think this year we're going to be much more aggressive in trying to be sure that the notice gets in families' hands and that they can make that informed choice.
And that would be good, good assistance from our family liaisons to help us
To
out
follow.
with that.
Yep. Our nurses will continue the contact tracing process when a positive case is identified in our school community. So I can't say enough about our nurses. I know I spoke at one of the last school committee meetings, but this was an area where there certainly was a trial and error. Almost in all instances, the nurses would call me and Jessica Gagnon, our lead nurse, just to run by what they did during their interview. And what we were finding is early on, we might have asked about their primary class and their transportation to and from school, but we didn't ask about potentially somewhere where they went on school grounds, or kind of a little wrinkle within their school day that might not have been picked up in the interview, and the nurse would circle back and quickly ask about that. So when we were going through this initial process, what we did is we created a template, an interview template that really covers all aspects of the school day and brings some continuity to the interview process to make sure that we're conducting a comprehensive interview where we're capturing their ride to school, their school day, any specialists they may see, peers that they were around, and their ride home. In addition to every student account, we also interview any adult that was present in the room, just to be sure that we don't have one historian. And then once we identify any close contacts, we then reach out to that family for support. One change to the close contact process this year that we are going to implement is what's called test to stay in school. So for any school-based close contact, meaning the designation of close contact was established, let's say in a classroom or some aspect of the school day, that student, instead of quarantining, would work with the school nurse each morning and take a Binex rapid test each day that they would have had to quarantine, just to be sure that they are indeed negative and can stay in school. This would not apply in a case where a sibling or a household member or a parent or guardian or caretaker that lives with the student was positive. We're deeming that kind of a different close contact than I was sitting next to them in English class and I may have been under 3 feet. That's a little bit of more of a gray area than when you're living with someone who currently has COVID. I'm going to pause there. Any questions on that? Because that's kind of a new policy.
So are we determining like 15 minutes, maybe in the same classroom? Are we doing a timeline?
Yep.
Or?
So there. Oh yeah, Stacy, they dig to the very specifics. Lauren has sent us guidelines that we're going to send out in terms of what constitutes a close contact.
Okay.
So typically in a school setting, it's under 3 feet for 15 minutes.
Okay.
It could be if somehow 2 people were unmasked, or kind of an extreme instance like that, where someone sneezed or coughed. That kind of supersedes the 15-minute rule. But vaccination status is also coming into play, and all of those close contact determinations are made in conjunction with the Board of Health. So it's exactly what the community is doing, and we follow that to a T. We don't waver.
Sounds good.
The final bullet on this page, so classroom space is going to be organized, as I said, to optimize spacing. Desks will be in rows, and the rows will be as spaced out as possible. We're going to try to avoid instances where students would be facing each other. But again, kind of the foundation of all of this, regardless of how the room is set up, is that every single person in that room is wearing a mask. All right, so lunch and recess. So that's a quote from Dr. Kong, our first bullet: eat outdoors when the weather permits. There is no better ventilation than Mother Nature. So we're going to continue the practice of going outside for lunch when we can. I touched base with Dr. Perella this morning. Obviously, they have the largest lunches. He's going to open kind of that community area just outside the cafeteria that wraps around towards the auditorium. They have tables out there. They have cement blocks where the kids can space and eat. A lot of this, a lot of the policy with lunch and recess is going to be routines and procedures that are going to be stressed by our administrators. So students are going to have masks on when they're not eating and drinking. We're going to have routines, like I know, particularly in the elementary grades, they say more chew time, getting a chew time in right away so that students can eat, finish their lunch, put their mask back on, and then socialize with masks back on. We are going to have assigned seats in the cafeteria so that if there were an instance where we needed to contact trace, we know who sat where. Obviously, we would conduct interviews, but it's even, again, another layer to have that seating chart to be able to know who is sitting exactly where and become familiar with where kids typically sit during lunch and who they sit with. We're going to arrange the tables in the most optimal manner possible. But right now, I know just in talking to a lot of principals, they're working on ways in which they can get outdoors and space the children out as they start to eat, especially in the early fall months when the weather is beautiful. And it's great to be outside with the fresh air. It's a win-win, really. I think the kids love it, and it's a nice break from being in the building and provides that safety layer yet again. All right.
Richie,
Yes.
with lunches being in some schools as tight as they are, are you allocating more time to have them chew and then go outside? Has that been taken into consideration, or is it necessary?
I think with any of this, Fred, that the principals are going to use a few minutes before and a few minutes after to do what they have to do to make sure that lines are spaced, that kids are eating in strategically. So yeah, they would use extra time if they needed it. I don't think they're going to crunch anything in, but they certainly would be asking the kids, come on, let's eat up. I mean, that's something that we do during a typical year to make sure that someone's not taking their first bite with 4 minutes left in the lunch period. I know administrators are constantly circulating saying, come on, let's eat up, let's clean up. And then once that's done, they're going to be required to put their mask back on. And they can certainly talk to their peers during that time.
But Richie, there were times when the lunch line was just so long that the kids at the end of it were just getting their food and the lunch period was almost over. So, I mean, okay, they're aware there's a problem and then they'll work it out. They've got
and Fred, honestly, that was one of my, go ahead.
I was gonna say, we're also gonna use some of the modified meals like we did last year. Like there'll be a lot more grab and go. So it'll be a quick grab a bag and go get your seat kind of thing.
Good.
And Fred, that was my biggest pet peeve as a principal. I used to say, why wouldn't you just want to sit at your table? And then when we get to like the last 3 or 4 kids, then bring up a new group of students. So I know a lot of the principals do that. They don't let the line sit back. They get the kids in their seat and they call them up by table so that the line isn't massive.
Richie, will we still be entertaining mass breaks during the day?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Using the same practices that we used last year. Yep. All right. So common areas. We are going to continue to discontinue locker use. So the kids are not going to use lockers to open the school year. And this is one of those policies, like many of the things that I'm outlining, that as our circumstances change and perhaps even as weather changes and people start to bring heavy winter coats, this would be something that we would revisit. But for right now, congregation at lockers is a big item. And wherever we can avoid congregation, we want to do so. And we feel like just to get ourselves off and running for the school year, that not having lockers would be appropriate. Other common areas such as water bubblers, urinals, and bathroom stalls, we are going to still continue to tape off every other stall or urinal or water bubbler. And in working with Dr. Kong, she said it's going to be important for administrators to observe, collect feedback, and just find out, like, is this creating more lines in congregation because people have to wait? And if that's the case, then we'll make the change immediately. But to start the year, we're going to start with keeping those kind of walled off to make sure that people are using every other stall or sink or bubbler. We're going to continue our practice of using logs to log who goes to the restroom when, just in case there was a positive case. We would certainly revisit all of those logs. We've added additional security and translation. The hope is that we can have some of those folks stationed near a bathroom to provide another layer of supervision as students use the restroom during class. So for student arrival and dismissal, the kind of core foundational point here is to utilize as many entrances and exits as possible to avoid bottlenecks. So we're not going to go back to, for instance, at the Rumney, we used to have 2 entries, 2 exits. And I know they started using a 3rd down by Ambrose Park where they could spread the kids out in the field, maybe even a 4th that I'm not aware of. And without mandating who's going to what exit, we're going to leave that obviously up to the experts, the building principals, where they can employ either they could do it by grade level, like all of grade 6 enter in this door, grade 7 this other door, grade 8 this third door. They could take a first class, last class approach, meaning if your first class is down this wing of the school, you enter in this exit. And if your last class is down this wing of the school, you exit out this door. So that's going to be left up to the principals as to what they feel is going to be the most effective for their school, as all of their schools are obviously different. But they are going to utilize as many entrances and exits as possible. So this year, students are going to be permitted to transition from class to class during talking about the upper elementary grades and middle and high school. Again, during our advisories and our morning meetings, it's going to be important to establish the routine of students walking directly to their class without pausing, stopping, congregating, which can be a typical thing during transitions. When we can, we would stagger transition to departmentalized classes by a minute or 2 and space the classes. So if we had an ELA class going into the math class, we'd have the ELA class go down the hall to the left. Math class would enter into their room, and then they would fill into the math classroom once the math class is in. Not everything is that neat, but during instances where it is that neat, we're going to take advantage of that. We're going to continue to follow the 2-way traffic hallway rules. We instituted the arrows last year. I think kids fell right in line with that. They did a great job in terms of their transitions when we did indeed do some transitions at the end of last year at the high school to elective classes. And then if possible, group grade level classes in close proximity to one another to cut down on travel time and distance. I know that's kind of already in place, but again, during instances where we're 14 days away from opening, if there's a clean change that can be made without disrupting the whole schedule, I know principals are looking at that now and making those final few changes to the schedule. Some kind of non-school day items. So anybody that's visiting the building will have to make an appointment to enter the school building. That's just for predictability, the ability to know who's coming in and out of the building, when, where, what time are they coming. This is obviously not applicable to any type of emergency or unforeseen circumstance. If a student, has to be dismissed for whatever reason, and it's not a planned dismissal, family members and caregivers are welcome to come to the school. But when we can, we're going to make appointments to be sure that we know who's coming when. In terms of in-person meetings, our staff meetings can take place indoors, in person while masked. We're going to prohibit food from our opening day meeting. I know that the principals are still planning to have a breakfast where educators can come in, grab food and drink, take it up to their classroom, have a little breakfast, and then go to the staff meeting. Small meetings with family can take place indoors. We're going to ensure, again, that all visitors as well as staff members and students are masked in those meetings. And if there are any large gatherings, I don't think we're going to be there in the fall, but thinking about things like field day way down the lines, they have to be held outdoors, whether or not we have food. When we have a massive kind of class activity where we're getting into the hundreds of people, that must be held outside. It really can't be held indoors at this time. We're going to start to consider some walking field trips and perhaps even those with a bus ride of under an hour. I don't think we're going to rush to have them, but if a great opportunity came up and it's reasonable and we can ensure safety, I think it's something that we're going to start to consider. If there is a volunteer, whether it's a parent, guardian, caregiver, or just volunteer themselves, we may ask for a vaccination proof to attend. Because again, that's not something that's mandated. It's something that someone's volunteering for. And so we want to make sure that we're putting everyone in a safe spot for that. And then the final item, and perhaps the sub-bullet serve is the most important part of this. We're to continue our work with the Revere Board of Health to host local vaccination clinics for students who are 12 years or older. I mean, they did an amazing job with all of the vaccine clinics. We're going to continue to work with Lauren and perhaps set up a Pfizer clinic in the fall, the early fall, for any 12 students who's 12 or older and is interested in receiving the vaccine. I got these 2 data points from Lauren last week that I was very encouraged by. Revere students that are age 12 to 15, 64% have received at least 1 dose of the Pfizer vaccine, and 52% are fully vaccinated. And students age 16 to 19, or residents who are students, 73% have received at least 1 dose and 62% are fully vaccinated. And I have to tell you, in a conversation with Dr. Kong, that was such a huge sense of relief, because when we talk about those layers, knowing that from students that are 12 to 19 that are walking through our doors, that over half are vaccinated, fully vaccinated, and probably the number's higher. It's just a great layer of protection for us as a school community. And that's it for the policies and guidelines.
So we're hoping that the policy subcommittee will be able to recommend adoption of these policies at Tuesday's meeting. And we'll review them again there in the same detail that Dr. Gallucci did tonight, just so that the community has another opportunity to hear through them.
Diane, if I may.
Go ahead, Fred.
Richie, the field trips, an hour or under, how did you come up with that? I mean, if they're going to be on a bus going for an hour, they're going to be going for a half an hour, they're still going to be in close proximity. I mean, I was a great fan of field trips, and, you know, is this a risk that is worth taking?
Probably not early on. I think the key word there was we're going to consider.
Okay.
And I don't think anybody's running to have this, but I think if something came along and we could ensure safety and we somehow had the spacing and the safety and the masks and all of those things, it would be something that we're going to start to consider. I think we'd be much quicker to approve a walking field trip. Like I know the Garfield Middle School at times does things where they walk the beach, something like that. But certainly when we're starting to put people on a bus, I think at least to start the school year, Fred, that's going to be something that we're not going to rush towards.
That's reasonable. I mean, because any trip into Boston's under an hour.
Right.
You know, you got walking field trips. You can go to the Rumney Marsh Burial Ground. I mean, there are walking ones, which just to get them out in the fresh air. All right.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to, see it.
Yeah.
Now, who's going to have the final say? How about the nurses? I'm sure they'll be involved to discuss with the principal the feasibility of okay. All right.
Yep. And even us working with the Revere Board of Health. So me meeting with the principal and Lauren. Yep.
Thank you.
It's just really a little bit of a step forward from where we were last year, where the policy was absolutely no field trips, don't even ask, so
Okay.
try to head in that direction.
So Diane, perhaps if you have time, I'll try to do it. My trip to Kentucky tomorrow morning has been canceled.
Oh, no.
At the very last moment, last night, about 9 p.m. I think it's the National School Board should have made that decision a lot earlier, but I'm kind of grateful.
Mhm.
Although I don't want to sit here and do all 4 days on Zoom. But now that I have some extra time, I will go through the policy issues that we discussed before, and also the handbook cover page, and maybe highlight what I might think would be beneficial, and I'd ask you to do the same on your end.
Sure.
And then maybe we can put something together, add Richie's, and we can just do bullet points.
Great.
And maybe present that to the school committee. But with this, Fred, I'm going to ask for a recommendation to bring this forward. Accept it.
So moved.
Second. Anything else, Rich?
That's
I'm
it in
sorry you're going to
regards
be
to
doing it again next week, but
That's okay. This is a good dry run.
yeah, if you got to pass Fred, you can get it by anyone. Fred has a comment.
What, no, are we gonna be doing the buses
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we're on to handbooks.
Oh.
Well, can we do the bus one first? I think that'll be a little bit
Oh, I'm
faster.
sorry. He
Okay.
said that too. Okay, thanks.
And
All right.
so I'll just give a little bit of an intro. This is a brief presentation. It's a new problem that's emerging for us. And we're not even sure right now if it actually is a problem. But we wanted to bring it to the committee's attention. Since we no longer have expanded learning time at 3 of our schools, we are running into a crunch. Healy Bus is running into a crunch, finding bus drivers to hire. And our contract with them has to change slightly, might have to change slightly, because what we were able to do with the ELT schools was recycle one bus and driver that would do an early run, say at the high school, and then do a late run at Garfield Middle. Or a bus that did an early run at the Lincoln up to North Revere could then also be used to do a later run at the Wayland up to North Revere. We don't have that luxury of reuse because all of the schools are dismissing at the same time right now. And that might be something that we actually want to look at going forward if we need to stagger times. There's just not time to do that right now. It's something that will require negotiations with the unions. And so for this school year, we want to make sure that we're being proactive and making sure that we can reasonably and affordably get everybody where they need to be. So Richie, if you can go to the next slide.
Yep.
Well, let me ask Diane a question. Why are you referring that if we change the start time and the dismissal time, we have to negotiate with the teachers?
Yes, it would be a change in working conditions if their start time and end time changed.
It's not changing work conditions. They're still required to be there X amount of time. Okay, that's another issue. We'll drop that right now.
Okay. So we're starting right now. We've sent out a survey this week to all families and asked them to let us know if they intend to use transportation next year, because then we'll have a better idea of whether or not we have a problem. We know that some people don't want to use transportation, so it might be that we're going to be okay. But so we asked anybody who wants transportation to let us know by Monday, and those surveys went out to all families, and then all families in the middle school and high school. Sorry,
And
then
families that live a mile or more from their school.
right, okay, and then so some things that we're considering, and we wanted to put this out to you. We'll have the survey results in time for the meeting on Tuesday. And so we're not looking for any action on this right now, but we just wanted to share the information that we're faced with. So if we look at the next slide.
So these would be the two extreme policies. When a student's home is 1 mile or greater from their middle or high school, or when the student's home is 2 miles or greater from their high school. So for the policy where it would be 1 mile or greater, as a district, we would need 32 buses. We currently have 20 contracted buses with Healy, and we have 3 RPS buses that are available. So we would need 9 additional buses, which would be an increase of $786,000 to our budget. When you go to setting the policy at the student's home has to be 2 miles or greater, we would need 20 buses as a district. We already have 20 contracted with Healy. The 3 RPS drivers and monitors would be repurposed in the special education world, and we would need no additional buses, and obviously there'd be no increase to the budget.
And not that I would want to inconvenience students and families, but we're not even required to have buses for high school.
Well, that was my point coming in on that. I would seriously consider, because when you go down on this presentation, you once again mention 1 mile or more, and the amount of buses is less. Again, a mile. You know, I realize safety. But if a bus is not necessary, I would strongly recommend looking at the routes. I mean, if they're crossing Squire Road or something, that's a lot different. But I would seriously have someone consider mapping bus routes, even if you did away with 1 mile. I mean, 1 mile, oh, God.
I'm sorry, Richard, you had 2 more.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Look at the bottom when you go down. Yes, okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So I started with the 2 extreme policies. Now I'm going to give you 2 that fall in the middle. So the one on the left-hand side is kind of uniform for middle and high school students. You have to be 1.5 miles or greater. So if you are at 1.5 miles or greater and you're a middle or high school student, we would need 25 buses, which means we would need only 2 additional buses from Healy at a cost of $174,700 for the school year. Now, the policy on the right actually comes out to the same breakdown and result of needed buses at 25 and the cost $174,700. But the policy would be different for middle than it would be for high school. So what we'd be doing, the policy on the right, if you're a middle school student and you live 1 mile or greater, you would be eligible for bus service. High school students would only be eligible if they were 2 miles or greater. And that comes out to roughly the same amount of buses needed in this presentation, exactly the amount of buses needed if you just set a single 1.5 miles.
And we have to keep in mind too, our middle school is lottery. So they might need the larger distance. They're not picking the school of their choice to be close to home. So maybe the 1 mile for middle school might be.
And it also might turn out when we get the data back on Monday that this isn't an issue, or that it's less of an issue than we think it is right now. You know what I mean? So we might be able to make one of these work more easily. We just wanted to put it on people's radar that we might be asking on Tuesday for folks for the school committee to look at the bus policy.
Richie, the 20 buses contracted in new over last year, or this is the same amount as last year?
I believe it's the same amount. The contract has changed.
Okay,
Yep.
so it's not an increase. If we had 20 last year, now we need 40. All right, thank you.
Yeah. And I think our need grew based on what Dr. Kelly said earlier, where we used to have a bus that could do a Rumney Marsh Academy afternoon run, and then that very same bus could do Garfield Middle because they got out so late in the day. But now all 3 middle schools are out at the same time, and so that's where we're in this conundrum.
I do like the fact that they all have the same time, because every time someone asks me, what time does Garfield Middle start? What time I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm so confused. So it does, it makes it easier. for me, the old woman.
But
So
Richie,
that
even,
looks-
excuse me, Stacy, Richie, even if we hire more buses or equal to the buses, you stated earlier that they're having trouble getting drivers.
Yes.
So even, okay, so that's something, and part of the equation we have no control over.
And that's everywhere, Fred.
Yeah.
Everyone's
No,
having
I
a difficult
realize.
time.
Yeah, but unemployment benefits are over September 4th or something, so that may change.
Mm.
But we look at that as an important factor because one of these two options that you see on the screen might be feasible. But if we go back to the previous slide, Richie, the option where we need the 32 buses and need to find 9 buses, which means you need to find 9 bus drivers, that's going to be a real stretch.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, people seem aware of what's on the horizon and acting, and as Diane mentioned, once the numbers come in, then that become, easier to predict.
Mhm.
Thank you. Good job.
Okay, well, I can't wait to see what Tuesday brings with the survey.
And I should thank Transportation Director Seth Novoselsky, who did a lot of this data pulling and figured out which kids live between 1 mile and 2 miles, et cetera, and really brought this issue to our attention.
Good. Okay, anyone have any questions? Mr. D'Ambrosio, do you have any questions for Dr. Galucci?
Nope, I'm good, thank you.
Okay. So moving on to handbooks. I didn't have any questions for elementary. There didn't appear to be anything.
Nothing glaring.
No, nothing. Middle school, the same thing. I didn't see anything really. I mean, I want to thank them for all their side notes. That's very helpful to me.
Mhm.
So, Fred, did you have any questions about middle school?
Oh, no.
Seacoast, the same thing. I have to say, I do, I don't remember there being a letter from the principals in previous years. Were there?
For Seacoast? I know there always were for the high school.
Yeah.
I believe there was,
I
actually.
liked reading it. It was nice. So thank you for that. Middle school, Seacoast. Fred, any questions on Seacoast?
No. Oh, well, maybe Richie, on the busing, that's a must, no matter where they are, right?
What's
Are there
that?
any- the kids going to Seacoast, that's edged in stone. There's not much flexibility there.
Right. They're going to be in the survey though. So the program that Mr. Novoselsky uses identify Seacoast students who live a mile or greater. So they got the survey.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
The athletic one, I really, there was a lot I liked. I liked the reviews for coaches. I liked how they put in the admin organization piece and the communications. That was really helpful. But I didn't have any, I did have a question on that. Didn't we always, the athletic coaches, weren't they always 3 years?
I believe so.
Always 3 years, but in this one, it's saying 1 year.
They have their review every year. I don't believe that's a change.
No, that was a change.
Can I pull it up to see?
Yeah, please. I want to.
I have to go to a different file. Hold on. Okay. And I'm just going to share my screen so we can all be looking at the same thing. Okay, which page are you referencing, Stacy?
It's athletic coaches, so it's towards the bottom. My coaching information.
Go slower.
Stop. Coaching appointment 16.
Okay.
Down the bottom, all coaches are appointed on a one-year basis and there is no tenure.
Yeah, I don't think that's a change.
It's
not
always been 3
highlighted.
years. And then you had to reapply for your job after 3 years.
Right, I do remember that provision. I remember Dr. Dakin putting something like that in. And
Could
are
you
we sure it's
please-
not in here somewhere else?
No, the 3 years is not in.
Hmm.
If you could just
Okay.
ask Frank for some clarification or a reason if it is being changed.
I'll do that.
Because it seems like, you know, it almost takes 2 years for any coach to really get acclimated, not only to the students, but, and then there's sometimes you want someone gone after 1 year. So it goes both ways.
Yeah, and I feel like this might be a kind of safety provision in that direction, more so than anything else, but I'll ask Frank.
Please, I appreciate it. Fred, did you have any questions on the athletic handbook?
No.
Okay, and then high school. My first question was, and some of these are just out of curiosity,
Okay.
what does it mean by mark T0, T1, T2?
Trimester 1. No, we are right. Let me try to pull that up too. Hold on.
T0, T1, T2. I thought it had to do with marking, or maybe absences.
I was thinking that it was tardy, levels of tardy.
Okay.
It is tardy.
Is it
Okay.
tardy?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know what the differences would be, Dr. Garcia?
It's you know, I remember us putting this policy together before. It's when they have T0 to T1, T2, T3, it's the number of incidents in terms of arriving into the classroom late. So that's what they calculated.
Okay.
It's like, T1 first incident, T1, T2 second, incident. I think they used to deduct points out of those studies. So I don't know if they're still doing it.
Okay.
All right, I have it up, so let me know if you have a page reference at all.
Unfortunately, I did not.
Okay.
That would be organization, and that's not me. And I have to say, I appreciate the editing and, instead of using the word discipline, interventions is being used. So I think that is a great edit. And another question I was curious about is, do we know offhand how many students use the APEX and how many students perhaps went to the Coast Collaborative last year?
I don't have that data on hand. Do you, Richie?
And it's just out of curiosity, so if you have a chance,
I don't have the Apex data, but I think I can dig up the Coast Collaborative. I just need a minute.
no big deal. I really did appreciate how we're going to use additional sections of the school for lunches. Not that they're going to be able to eat and drink in those areas, but I know pre-COVID, we had walked around the school one year, and Dr. Kelly, I think you were with us, and there was two girls in the hallway. They just wanted quiet time. And so when you do talk to some of the students, some might want to read, some might not want to, you just want to relax. So it was really nice to see that portion open up to other areas that they'll be able to use. And then the only question all three of us had was the headgear and the how it was put back in to allow hats. And we had voted on that to finish the pilot program and do away with the hats. So I know Susan was not for that. She's the one that had reminded me we already voted against that. Fred, I don't know how your feelings on it.
No, the no hats is fine with me. I'm going back to my days as an administrator, and it wasn't necessary as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, I prefer not to have them, and I look at it like, let's get them to wear their mask. Let's practice with that first. Like, I prefer not to, very much so. I'm not saying I definitely wouldn't revisit it. Even in the spring, I don't mind revisiting, but I think right now I really don't want to see a hat policy in place.
Great.
So, Fred, how would we word that as far as a recommendation with the high school
Just
handbook?
just a continuation of past policy that no hats or head dresses.
No, I'm talking about just recommending the adoption of the high school handbook, but exempt would be that hat policy?
Not exempt, well, exclude or exempt, yes.
Okay, or headgear and hoods, the hide student face. I gotta move our faces, it's covering.
I know, and I'm sorry, I was trying to move the sidebar so that it would show.
No, I moved my
Oh, there you
sidebar,
go.
so
That
it's
might work.
fine.
I do just want to say that as you guys know, and we don't have to rehash this right here, right now, but this got a little bit wound up in the COVID because it was right before COVID happened. That I think the committee took the vote that at the end of that school year, for the following school year, which was the 2021 school year, that the hat policy would be reinstated. And then, of course, we weren't in person for most of the year. So it kind of became a little bit of a moot point. And I recognize that the committee took that vote to reinstate the old hat policy, but I just do want to say that this is something that came to us from the kids whose voices we're trying to amplify, and who gave us a really convincing argument about some of the cultural bias that's inherent in these policies. And with our push toward equity and inclusion and, all the work that we're doing in those areas, I would hope that the committee might think about that again and I just want to say that I'm going to articulate that on Tuesday as well. But of course, we will honor the wishes of the committee as we always do.
But Diane, if it's no headgear, how is that discriminatory? How is that bias? If they're not allowed to wear headgear, whether it's colors, whether it's groupings or whatever, how can that be
Yeah, and
biased?
I can, you know what I'll do also is I can find the presentation that the kids did for us last
You know
year, but they
what?
talked about,
I know Minna did the presentation. Neither student cared about the policy. They were asked to do it. They did not, what's the word I can use?
Either
It
way,
wasn't one of those projects that they themselves pursued.
right. I think that what their classmates had said, even if those two students didn't agree with it, was that they felt like some of the other kids felt marginalized because of it. Like we talked about African-American students needing to protect their hair at different times of the year in order to.
Yeah, but I do too. Look at mine today.
Right, but you can whenever you want, right?
If I was in school, I wouldn't be able to. No, I understand where you're coming from, and I understand how we want to use student voice and diversity. You know, it's going to be the big words for this coming year too. But I think that's where the importance of the Student Advisory Council, along with students meeting with us quarterly to have discussion. I think we can get much more information that way and much more input. So like I said, I have no problem revisiting this. I just, right now, I want to make sure they wear masks. So now you're putting a hat on and a mask and we see eyes. But
understood.
Again, you can present that Tuesday also. And I would love to sit with the kids and talk to them. It could be one of their projects for the year.
Absolutely.
So with that, I would make the recommendation to accept the Revere High School handbook, but keeping the head covering policy as we have in the past for now.
So moved.
Second. I'm checking my phone to see if Susan had one more text. I apologize. I wanted to make sure any of her questions I got to bring up. Nope. It looks like that was, because we talked about, so we talked about the failures due to absences, and she was all for that. What I did do was I was checking JH policy, and that was about absences. And I wanted to make sure it was more generalized, that we didn't have to specifically take out that word in, like 5 absences was a failure. That is not in the policy. So I think we're pretty safe with that. And again, where their student policy, where the J series are all student policies, that's where we can get the bulk of our students to start working with us on that one.
Awesome. That's great.
But that is all Sue had. Anyone else have any questions or? So a motion to adjourn?
Second. So moved. You can't make a motion. Motion to
Okay.
adjourn.
Second. So
Oh, excuse me,
7
Stacy, before we go, through you to Diane. Diane, if the state and federal regulations change on, coverts as far as mandatory masks, as far as anything, should we have any wordage that anything that we have in place is subject to state and federal guidelines?
Yes, I think that we should. And I think that that is in the piece that Richie's putting together that
Okay.
Stacy and I can add to, just saying, as we have throughout the pandemic, we will continue to follow the guidance of the state and the federal
Okay,
boards of health.
just so somebody can't come back and say, well, you vote, this is it. No.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to, a higher authority, for want of a better term.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
definitely. Yep.
Okay, so we do have an adjournment for 7:19, and thank you everyone for taking the time.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank-
Good night. Thanks, Richie. Thanks, Lorenzo.
Bye.
I'm going to take